The World Indigenous Nations Higher Education Consortium, or WINHEC, is the first and only organization addressing the higher education needs and concerns of Indigenous peoples worldwide. 2022 marked WINHEC's 20th anniversary, as well as the consortium's first meeting since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Established in 2002 on the Stoney Nakoda Reserve in Alberta, Canada, WINHEC was born out of the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education and its foundational Coolangatta Statement, which outlined the failure of non-Indigenous education systems and called for greater self-determination for Indigenous peoples to establish their own teaching methods and institutions. One of the most fundamental rights of Indigenous peoples, the statement proclaimed, is the right to be Indigenous. It went on to stress the physical and spiritual connection that Indigenous societies have to the earth. The authors called for greater inclusion of elders in curriculum and underscored the need for language preservation and revitalization. But some Indigenous educators saw the need for an organization focused specifically on higher education, establishing WINHEC in response. The founders of WINHEC penned their own chartering statement, the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples Higher Education, affirming their commitment to building partnerships that restore and retain Indigenous spirituality, cultures and languages, homelands, social and economic systems, and self-determination. The organization also established its own academic peer-reviewed journal to give Indigenous scholars a venue for publishing, and in 2003, WINHEC formally chartered its own accreditation authority, which devised a handbook that outlined review processes, eligibility requirements, self-study protocols, and program commitments and responsibilities. Since its founding in 2002, WINHEC has met annually or biannually every year until the pandemic shattered the educational landscape as we know it. But in August of 2022, World Indigenous educators picked up the pieces, reconvened and rekindled the bonds that first brought them together 20 years ago. They met at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College in the woodlands of northern Minnesota, and their drive for self-determination and sovereignty in higher education was as strong as ever. Tribal College Journal joined WINHEC at Fond du Lac and had the opportunity to sit down and discuss some of the foremost issues in global Indigenous higher education today and WINHEC's role advancing those issues. Tribal College Journal asked conference attendees what WINHEC means to them, what they see as the organization's driving principles, concerns, hopes, and goals, as well as the challenges ahead.
I'm Elmer Guy. I'm president of Navajo Technical University. Always was interested in what other Indigenous nations were doing. Learned that challenges are very similar to what we are dealing with back home, how the government is really not supportive of what we're trying to do, accreditations, regional accreditations that we have to work with. They're more focused on the Western education. But we believe the Indigenous education is equally important, and so that's why I think WINHEC supports those efforts like that, where you involve your elders in the educational process, learning about your culture, your language, and then they support what you're dealing with, perhaps, protecting the environment and things like that. The way that WINHEC is organized is they have a male and a female co-chairs. So I represent the male, and then Jalan from Taiwan is the female co-chair. What's interesting is no matter how far apart we are, with oceans and mountains, that separate us, land. But there's a lot of similarities with the culture. people treating each other very nicely, like one of their own. And I think the hearts are closer than the distance. And that's what I really like, is being a part of this wonderful WINHEC family.
My name is Jolan Shea. My indigenous name is Bawarik Takaromai. I'm from Taiwan, Shilaya Nation. Work as a professor at the University of the National Donghua University, College of Indigenous Studies. Also director for Center for International Indigenous Affairs, and currently as a co-chair for WINHEC. I think in Taiwan, it's just like the most of our WINHEC family members that we've been colonized for years and years and several generations. So our cultures, our languages, our identity has been taken away. And the most difficult thing for us is we trying to decolonize ourselves. When we fight for our rights, sometimes it's hard for people to understand that it's just our basic right. And for example, for indigenous education opportunities, although we get all the mainstream education, but what we want is our own traditional value, our knowledge system being restored. And that is hard because most of people don't understand that. Also, they think that it's not compatible with the mainstream society. So if you want to go back to your indigenous system, you probably cannot keep up with the contemporary society. So you are not compatible. You are not capable to as an individual, and then you lose your opportunity to have a good social status. So that is a hard thing for us to, in one hand, we want to restore our education system, but on the other hand, we needed to decolonize ourselves, our own people, and to fight or to persuade mainstream people to understand our education is valuable. I think the most valuable for WINHEC to support the way is we have a different indigenous nation around the world. They can share their struggles and their successful stories and how they cope with the difficulty they're facing in their own societies.
Wiyabu. My name's Leanne Holt. I'm actually the co-deputy chair of WINHEC, and I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor Indigenous Strategy at Macquarie University, and I'm a Warramai Biripi woman from the mid-north coast of New South Wales, so an Aboriginal woman, and a saltwater woman. In 2011, some representatives couldn't attend, so they were asked if I would go to the WINHEC meeting, which was in Peru. So I had no idea what WINHEC was at that stage. So here I rocked up and I sat there and I watched, and it was just amazing. I was in awe of all of these people and the energy and the passion and enthusiasm that all of these people in this room had for Indigenous higher education and the potential that could be achieved by creating this, by the creation of this network of awesome scholars and leaders. Ray Barnard was presenting at that meeting the second edition of the accreditation and the WINHEC accreditation. I worked for the University of Newcastle at Wallatuka Institute, and we were leaders in Indigenous higher education in Australia, and I was watching this presentation and thinking, oh wow, we could apply for this accreditation, I think that we're at a stage that we could be the first in Australia to apply for this WINHEC accreditation and go through this process. But so I came back to the staff at Wallatuka and I said, I went to this meeting and it was amazing, and all of these passionate Indigenous people from around the world, and it was such an amazing space, and they've got this accreditation that looks at, like, you know, the cultural integrity of what you do and who you are as an Indigenous educational organisation, and I think that we could apply. We rock up in 2012 in Taiwan with our letter of intent and our presentation to start the process. We presented what we had, and straight away they're like, no, that's not quite right. You haven't quite got it. And but they said, but that's okay. We're here, and we want you to carry on that journey, and we'll be walking beside you. Usually accreditation takes 3 years, and it took us an extra year. It took us 4 years because we spent that year sitting with our community. And we already had a very good relationship with our community, but this took that relationship to another level. We spent a lot of time, like, you know, talking through and working out what exactly was Indigenous about what we did, and what were the values that actually informed what we did, and what was important to our communities from a cultural perspective. And so we came up with our cultural standards when we had our site visit, and they sort of gave us an indication that we were going to get our accreditation there. We were on country. We were at the Miami site, which is our creator site. It was definitely a memorable experience, and so I cried. First of all, I think that some of our significant challenges are based on our history, which is in some ways very similar to many Indigenous nations. I mean, obviously it's a colonised history, and one where access to both a Western education but also our cultural education was taken away from us. So, like, you know, those that came before us weren't allowed to speak language, and they weren't allowed to practice their culture. They were moved on to missions and reservations, and they were very much controlled through policies and legislations, and they were sent to mission schools where they were not given any like a high level of education. It was more around servitude or labour. Like in New South Wales, there was a policy that was brought in that was called exclusion on demand policy, where a non-Aboriginal parent or community person could write a letter in and say that they didn't want their child in the same classroom as an Aboriginal child, and so they were excluded. There's also another one called Clean, Clad and Courteous, because it said that Aboriginal children could go, same time, Aboriginal children could go to school as long as they were clean, and they were courteous, and that they were like, you know, they were reasonable from a non-Aboriginal perspective. Another policy was the exemption certificate, where if you were of mixed blood and deemed white enough, then you could get an exemption certificate, but it meant that you weren't allowed to have any contact with your community or your culture, or like, you know, you had to break all ties and you had to assimilate into a white community. We're still seeing the impacts of that generation, like, you know, from generation to generation. Like, a lot of our students are still first in family. I realised how important it was to have someone that actually understands the system and understands the structures around education, and particularly higher education, to say, like, you know, this is a pathway that's open to you and it's accessible to you, and you should aspire to it. The other thing is, like, financial. Like, you know, a lot of our communities still live in very low socioeconomic conditions and environments, and like, although in Australia you can defer your fees and pay your fees back when you start working, to actually relocate and to a university, and particularly if you live in a rural or remote area, it still comes as very expensive. But I'd say that the third challenge is the dislocation of students from community and family. So, like, you know, through policies such as the Stolen Generation and the exemption certificate and other policies that removed Aboriginal people from their communities or their families, there's a lot of students that are not confident in who they are as Aboriginal people. And coming into higher education, is that there's a whole change of culture already, like, you know, to sort of get used to a new environment and a new journey. But if you come in there and you're actually not confident in who you are as an Aboriginal person as well, and you're trying to struggle through that, that creates real challenges of self-confidence and self-ability. And so a lot of what we do is creating that sense of belonging and sense of community, so that students don't feel that they're an imposter within the university. And I think that in our communities we talk a lot about the imposter syndrome, and so it's about making them feel that they do belong.
I'm Walter Kahumoku III. I am at the University of Hawaii West Oahu. I work right underneath the Chancellor. I'm her executive. And I'm from Hawaii. Originally, the WINHEC organization elected to put together a process for higher education, because WINHEC is about higher ed. And they were looking for a process that wasn't necessarily nation-bound, not funded by a nation, or in our case, our federal government, not required to set a set of standards that only that particular country would want to see in all of their educational processes. It is, WINHEC gets its basis around the push for sovereignty, educational sovereignty in particular. And accreditation allows us now an international look at how to accredit organizations, schools, institutions in that manner. That educational sovereignty is important to Indigenous, Aboriginal, and tribal people. One of the biggest challenges that we face in Hawaii is that higher ed has never really been open to Native Hawaiians in particular. In 1990, I think we only had like 9.9% of the total student body in all 10 campuses that were Native Hawaiian. Today we're boasting above 24%. But that's because over the years, over the decades really, a lot of us have put forward initiatives, policies, laws that have forced our state legislature, our UH system to open the doors to otherwise young folks, or even returning adults from other careers like the military, who probably would never have ventured to a four-year institution to graduate study, even to earn a doctorate. That was unheard of. Now, thank goodness, the University of Hawaii system is moving to become an Indigenous serving institution as an entire system. And that has changed really what we're about. Accreditation now becomes super important for that aspect.
Kia ora, my name is Mike Graham. I am from Aotearoa, New Zealand. My native tribe is called Ngāti Kaufata. And in New Zealand I used to work for Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. It was the first Indigenous university in the world. And I was doing language revitalisation there. Now I'm doing language revitalisation in Canada, helping the First Nations people there to revitalise their three languages, Ojibwe, Oji Cree and Cree. I'm working for Matawa First Nations Management in Thunder Bay, bringing people together, first and foremost, bringing all the Indigenous people together from around the world, and also focusing on education, higher education for all our peoples, so that no matter whether it's our own traditional knowledge, whether it's English and all that, it's just something so that we are able to stand tall and proud and be able to walk in both worlds, whether it's the English world, whether it's your own traditional world. I think WINHEC has a lot to play in that. Yeah. I was working with the Wānanga, I was working with the CEO, Dr. Rongo Wetere, and he was one of the ones that brought me to Canada to start the language program. So he was one of the founders of WINHEC. Yeah, there were two of them, one from the United States here, and he was the other one. He also started WIPSI, mostly out of his own pocket. But when he told me what he wanted WINHEC for, yeah, it was sort of like, yeah, that sounds really good. He says, we've got to bring all our Indigenous people together. They're all scattered all around the world. Everyone's lost. We need to bring them all together under one umbrella, and we need to lift ourselves in education. We need to lift ourselves in our own, find our traditional knowledge again, find our traditions again, and celebrate all that, celebrate it, and show the world that, we are here, we're not going away. The education that they teach our people is not, you don't get it in the mainstream schools. So they're all being taught the wrong history. They've been taught the wrong way. How they've been taught, it's not how our kids should be taught. And then as they get older, they quit school because they're not being taught the right way. And what I mean by not being taught the right way is that our people are very kinesthetic learners. But in mainstream schools, as they go higher and higher, the kinesthetic part of learning gets taken out, and it becomes just auditory and visual. And our people are not learners like that. They need to be doing something. They need to be doing lots of hands-on activities. So they say that they're failures, but they're not. It's the system that fails them. It's not. Yeah, they didn't fail the school. The school system failed them. And what the government never ever tell anyone is that our higher education people, they come through our language nest, kohanga reo. They come through our Māori schools, which are called kura kaupapa Māori, and some of them go on to whare kura, which is the high school. So they go through there, and it's total immersion right through. And then when they go to university, yep, they're shocked at how much they know. Even though it's a mainstream university, our kids just shoot straight up in the air, yeah, and they succeed better at university than the ones that come through the mainstream system, which is, yeah, it just shocks everyone. When they achieve at a mainstream university, they've reached that pinnacle where they can now comfortably say, I can now walk in both worlds confidently. As a Māori person, yeah, I can now walk in both worlds.
My name's Rebecca Jameson. I'm the president of an institute in Canada, what they call Canada, Six Nations Polytechnic. My people are the Six Nations Confederacy. There are 6 tribes, if you will, using American language. We call them nations. We live together in one community. We started to look around, find ways that we could join with others in a collective movement to, get support in what we wanted to do in Indigenous education. And so we allied ourselves with a number of organizations. We used to go to the NIEA conferences, we would go anywhere we could find like-minded people and support and be re-energized in our purposes. So, and over the years we decided that, with WINHEC, we thought that WINHEC was aligned with what we wanted to do. And because it was an international movement, by then things were becoming very international in the Indigenous world with the UN and UNDRIP and so on. The Indigenous movement was really becoming quite global. So we decided that we would really take a close look at WINHEC, and so we decided that we were going to apply for accreditation, and we did, and we received our accreditation in 2017. And so once we did the accreditation piece, then it was look around and how can we now give back, So since then I have participated in accreditation site visit. I just worked with the Samis this last year, and because it was COVID, we had to do it all virtual, which was a bit of a challenge, more for them I think than for us, even though we were in totally different time zones from Hawaii to Norway, and I was in the middle. They had to put everything on digital, so they sent us lots and lots of documents we had to read and many videos we viewed, and then we did a number of online interviews with, which is part of the process and the rigor of the process, so. But it was a good experience, I think, for everyone, and we're able to affirm what they're doing, We saw the evidence that what they said they were doing is definitely there. The evidence is clearly there, that what they're doing with Indigenous education is in fact happening. So really that's the process, is to verify and to hold up and affirm that for everyone, and to encourage them to continue in what they're doing. I think WINHEC's significance comes from the fact that, number one, it is international. It is international, and over the years it has gained some awareness, maybe not as much as we would like, but because of the process that's in place and the rigor that's involved in the accreditation process, it has gained its place of respect and integrity in quality assurance in Indigenous education. So that's why I think other jurisdictions are looking to WINHEC and saying, we better have a close look at this, because this looks like a really, this is something we can learn from, or this is something we can integrate with. There are other organizations looking at WINHEC for that purpose. Even though we're in the southern part of the country, we went through the whole residential school experience. In fact, we had a residential school in our territory, and we're still feeling the effects of that whole colonization process. Our languages went to a state of almost extinction, so we had to really, we still have multiple pronged approaches to language revitalization in the community. So there's that piece in terms of the damage that was done to the culture and the damage that was done to the community ways of living and being really impacted the dynamic of the community and young people's confidence to be able to proceed in education. And opportunities to be involved in Indigenous education weren't there, so they were going into education of the others, and having experienced that historical collective experience, we're going in many of them in a non-confident way. And then you're running into different cultures, and there's cultural misunderstanding, and there's racial issues, and so many of our students did not succeed past high school. Say you send 100 students to grade 9, we would be lucky if we would see maybe 20 finish high school. Something clearly had to change, so that's one of the reasons why we started a high school program in our institution. So we do offer high school, and it's from our perspective. So one of the first programs we started at Six Nations Polytechnic was we did the job readiness programs, for example, to get people into employment. And then we worked with universities in our area, and we created a program, we call it the university program, the year one. So every university put a course on the table, and they said, okay, Six Nations Polytechnic, you offer those courses. So, and we do. So the students take those courses with us in our environment, and they learn about themselves, and they learn language, and they go through that learning experience. They build confidence, self-confidence, and then from there they can go off to any of those universities that we partner with. And so that has been a very good access mechanism for our students. But now we have our own degrees in languages, so many of them are staying with us now, and we will expand to different degrees as well. But we'll always partner with those institutions that are willing to partner in a respectful way.
Scano de hada sene kaso Kenya de navigation de nayakat ne Quincident. My English name is Kevin, but I go by Bubba, and I'm from Six Nations, Ontario, Canada. And I'm the chair of the board with Six Nations Polytechnic, and Six Nations Polytechnic has been a part of WINHEC for a number of years, and we were accredited in 2017. So it was quite the process of being accredited and being recognized by other Indigenous people from around the world, and they came to us, they came to our organization and had a site visit. We went through the whole process of what WINHEC offers in terms of their accreditation. And so it was a process that for me to be able to see as a part of the board, to see what we are doing at Six Nations Polytechnic, and if that's what we're aiming and striving to do, that's what we're actually doing. So, and it just affirmed of what they seen and what we're saying and what they seen is that's what we're actually doing. I think it's being able to come together, and so we have Aboriginal post-secondary institutions, organizations, like-minded people from around the world that come together, share ideas, share thoughts, share concerns, share struggles. And a part of that piece is that, how could we strive together? How could we work together to be able to bring ourselves back up? How could we strive ourselves to lift ourselves up together? And because even though that we're different countries and from around the world, maybe some of our struggles could be actually literally the same. So it could be, working with local governments to working with our, wider governments to national governments. So, but then also of looking at dollars and funding and everything else. So again, it's some of those kind of things that what we're striving to do and what we're working towards. We have some similarities within other organizations that are a part of WINHEC. So it's a place for us to come together. The first thing that I think of when I think of challenges is that would be it may not be accessibility, but it would be being able to the accessibility for students. So when it comes terms of funding, when it comes terms to being able students to have the dollars to attend colleges, but then also from the institute's perspective, it would be the lack of funding. We have local resources that are, that we are able to connect with, but when it comes back down to that core funding, we might not be able to do certain things.
So I'm from Karasjok, or Karasjok, in Norway, northern Norway. It's in Sápmi, and that's where people, we're a multicultural society with people. Most of the people are Sami, but there are Norwegians and Finnish and other as well, but mainly Norwegian, Sami and Finnish. I work as a teacher at Sami High School, meeting people from other indigenous groups, saying that there are so many similarities and things that we can learn from each other, and also that our students can get in touch with other students that are indigenous, because sometimes it's hard to be a minority, and some of our students feel that when they leave Karasjok or Karasjok, they feel different because they are different, so to speak, not in a negative way, but so that they can strengthen their identity and be proud of themselves. And I think that they can do that by being in contact with other indigenous youths. And of course, to strengthen the institutions that are members. So we think that it's a quality stamp to be a member of WINHEC. A lot of our students, they go to universities and colleges and they get a degree, but they don't come back. So when they leave the society, a lot of them never return. And that's a challenge for small societies, that you lose people, that they don't come back. And we need them because they know the language, it's their mother tongue, and when the youths don't return, that's not good.
With members from all over the world, we wondered what attendees saw as some of the shared Indigenous values that shape WINHEC and how the organization can facilitate change in higher education.
I think language is an important ingredient, and they have their own languages. Most of them are written, and then the culture is really about humans as people. We share a space. We share a space on Earth, and there's a lot of balance in what we do. There's always a male, female, positive, negative. Everything is a balance, and then you also respect what's around you. earth that we walk and sleep on every day. You respect that, and what's above us, the sun, clouds, and, and how they are. Mother Earth is the female, and the sun is the male, and that kind of thing. And even the rain is there's a male rain and a female rain, and things like that. So it's pretty common where there are those that fly with wings, and they have a certain place in the way we do things. People, those live in the water, in the mountains, they all are respected, and they give messages to us, and very similar to other cultures, other nations. They have very similar things like that. The creation stories and what they value, what they're taught, is not much different than Navajo. The younger generation, they're not getting the information that we got. And so how do we then share that knowledge with them? And to let them know it is important. And some of them, some of the younger students might think that those indigenous ways of knowing, those are just for the old people. And it's like, no, it's not. It's for all of us. It's you included, the young, the old, everybody. And so we have challenges like that, trying to keep the indigenous ways of knowing, and that we're trying to share that with them, so that those information, that knowledge could be passed on from one generation to the next, and that we're all challenged by it, and how best to maintain it. There's efforts about ways of teaching language, eagle's nest or immersions, the different models. So we all try to help each other's out and what we think works best, and how to prepare it, and how to present things. And so WINHEC, through their accreditation, they validate the indigenous teaching, the indigenous ways of knowing. And so they help schools, either it's elementary or high school or colleges or universities, to work through a process where they have to show some commitment from the schools. They have to show that they are not just talking about it, but they actually are carrying out their mission. And then they show support from their tribes or from their institution, and so that it is sustained, and it's part of the whole effort of what the school is trying to do. It's rigorous to go through that process. It's not just it's just as tough as going through any other accreditation process. And then we have the World Nations Higher Education Institution, and they recognize people that have made tremendous contributions in education, indigenous education, and they honor them with different areas, and they give them honorary doctoral degree, as well as they do quite a bit of research, and they have a journal as well. And I think those are some of the challenges that we have: is how do we share, provide opportunities so that our students could go to Taiwan, for example, or PhD students or whatever, and share the knowledge. I think the people here that I serve with, we we have an opportunity to learn from one another. And I think we should extend that to our students so that they also are given that opportunity.
Okay, I would say it's love and support. What I mean is like we are in different pace of trying to gain our indigenous rights and how we think about education sovereignty. And sometimes it's just talk, but by seeing other people trying to seek for our Board of Accreditation's work, you have to do self-study and to reflect what you really mean, our own value, our own education. And I think that is very meaningful because you see somebody else walk on this pathway, and then you can reflect on yourself. And then when you are doing that, other people will support you and then to tell you that they've been through that process. And so I think that is very valuable, that support each other and with love and then non-judgmental. And I also like, we always look at the bright side, even though our life is hard. So I think that is what you look from WINHEC, everybody. You know, it's like when you talk about sad story, but you still cheers and then laughing and then support each other. I think that is the most valuable part about WINHEC.
Definitely respect. I think respect is a really important value in all of our communities. And actually walking through the building here where they have the values on the floor, myself, we've got some students here and some other staff, and we felt totally at home walking down that hallway and seeing the values written on the floor, like it was our own building. So definitely respect for our country and our land, and respect for each other, respect for our elders, respect for the knowledge that has been and that is to come. Also reciprocity, and I know that all of our communities talk a lot about reciprocity and that needing to give back, and Roxanne spoke this morning about that the giving forward as well, and that's that legacy piece about we have a responsibility for the knowledge that we have, that we have been given to pay that forward and to give that forward as well. So that responsibility. So our elders and our knowledge holders talk very much, when they talk about values, we talk about ours. So respect, reciprocity, responsibility, resilience, because I think we can also share. It's probably not really a value, but I think we can all share the the personal attribute of resilience and being resilient through many challenges and generations of challenges and trauma, and being resilient to still be strong and still move forward and create a future world for our young people.
Language is really a part of our identity. So I'm going to start there first and foremost. For many who have lost their languages, they're not commonly spoken in the household or in communities. Language revitalization is really critical. For those who have still a great number of language speakers, right now it's really about maintenance for them, so that every generation that comes is empowered by their language. And then there's a whole slew of us who are building and revitalizing the language in our own communities. So for example, in 1980, the Census Bureau counted only 2,000 Native Hawaiians who spoke Hawaiian. Today we're boasting almost close to 30,000 because of the efforts that we've done in order to grow Hawaiian language and the Hawaiian language use in not just classrooms, but homes and in communities. You can walk into a Safeway and you can now hear people speak Hawaiian, and that is unheard of in even the last 10 years. I'm happy because my son, who's 18 years old now, can actually communicate back to me in Hawaiian. So it's really a nice thing to be able to walk into a situation and all of a sudden I hear this little banter in Hawaiian and I can reply to him because he doesn't want to speak in English. So it's been a really joyous piece. I think the second part of it is control over our education. Almost all of these Native communities, whether we're in Taiwan or in Sami land up north in Norway or Finland or Sweden, if we're talking about the Maori in New Zealand, Aotearoa, they're all talking about the ability to now either gain control or regain control over education. So educational sovereignty has become a value piece that's important to almost every Native community across the world. I think that's been very big. I think maybe the third value that I would say is that the integrity of cultural identity is very critical to all of us, right? Just as we lose our elders, those who are our knowledge keepers, we have to grow new ones. And that in and of itself is a process because so much of this isn't written, so much of it is passed generationally. It's an oral process, right? There are certain customs and pieces that are kept sacred away from the eyes of a camera. Those are really important. And I think that's what WINHEC also honors, the spiritual nature, that cultural identity piece that's important to each and every community.
Values about language. You know, everyone knows that without language, that's when your culture starts to go down. And that's what we've found with language revitalisation, that language needs to be fixed first. If language isn't fixed first, then the rest of your culture is going to go down because language is the foundation of everything in a culture. Yeah, if we're not looking after our languages, or if we think that there's this other pathway we should be taking other than language to try and fix our culture, it's not going to work because the language isn't there. Language is what makes us. Yeah, language is what makes us. It's what makes us unique to anyone else in the world. Yeah, everyone thinks that it's your culture that makes you unique, and it's not. It's your language that makes you unique from someone else. From another culture. So every culture has their different ways of speaking, and even in those cultures they have their different ways of speaking through different dialects. Once you start to build that and build on language revitalisation, everything else is just going to click into place.
Well, I think the appreciation of WINHEC, as I said before, I think comes from the broader context of international presence. So, you know, when our community found out that we were applying for international accreditation through an international Indigenous organization of peers, if you will, they immediately paid attention to that. And then when we achieved the accreditation, they were very proud of that fact. Like, we have, in our own world, we have proven that we are, you know, up to standard and we are accepted among our peers. So I think it really made a difference to our community. And then with the government of Ontario, they have a jurisdiction over education, specifically higher ed. So we were working with the province of Ontario to carve our space in the whole space of post-secondary education to make sure we had a space. So we worked with the government, and we eventually were successful having that government pass legislation that affirmed us, like not that they created us, because we were already created under our own jurisdiction. And that language is actually in the legislation, that we created under our own jurisdiction, and they acknowledge that we exist, and now we're going to be part of what's going to happen in the province officially. You know, so in the province of Ontario, we now have universities, colleges, and Indigenous institutes as part of public education. So we did that, and a part of that process, we said, you know what, we really need to make sure we have an Indigenous quality assurance process. So part of the legislation acknowledged, it didn't create, but acknowledged an Indigenous quality assurance process that was put in place, and that's now in place. So that quality assurance process acknowledges WINHEC's process. So us, for Six Nations Polytechnic, we had WINHEC accreditation So to go through this other council accreditation, we had to do less submissions of documents because we'd already gone through quite a rigorous process with WINHEC. So we just had to do some supplementary filings, and of course we had to go through a process of a visitation and so on. But so there's some recognition that's happening, and then that in turn is having a ripple effect onto more of the public education sphere. I would say at the beginning of all of it is a sense of the collective. Like it's no matter whoever I've talked to, whether they're in Norway or in the States or Hawaii or whatever, it's more a sense of coming from a sense of collective responsibility and not the individual perspective. Second to that, I would say is the connection to the land and the water, like knowing that you're connected and there's an interdependence there, and that humans are not the supreme beings. It's all intertwined, So I think that that's consistent across all the people. They may describe it differently. And so when you have that worldview, that collective and integrated worldview, your perspectives on things and your values and how you interact with people and how you interact with the physical world is different. And so that translates into education. It impacts pedagogy, it impacts, impacts the content of it, impacts your curriculum, everything, It's just a different way of being.
The first thing that I think of listening to that shared values is that being able to have love, compassion, understanding. So, but those are values that what we have as individuals. Those are values that we would have as Indigenous people. Those are values that would come in with our culture and our traditions. But then also the other part that I think of is the language. So having our Indigenous language, being able to speak with our Indigenous language, being able to communicate and share, and then being able to, like, where some places we have to revitalize our language. So I think that's a lot of places there. So having the experience at WINHEC, we were able to have those things. We were able to hear the struggles, but the triumphs, then the successes of what people are having. So today, Fond du Lac had shared of how their language program has increased. Great, wonderful. So I think of those things. But one little example I turn around and I'm thinking of as well is, so one of our WINHEC meetings was in Taiwan. And one of our members, it was his birthday. So when we got in our evening, we were all done for the day and we were going for supper and we were on the bus. And we turned around and we started singing happy birthday to him. And we sang it in English. Then we sang it in Maori, and then it was sung in Hawaiian. I turned around and I sung it in Kyuga. Then there was Taiwanese. Then there was Cantonese. And I was sitting there and I was just like, wow. However many that were on our bus, but we sang to him in 7 different languages. And I thought, this is a part of that as well. Like, I was so happy, I was so proud to be, just to be present, be in that moment, and then to be able to share and to be witness of being able just to have that acknowledgement of somebody singing happy birthday to them in 7 different languages. For me, I always look at it and I says, because our organizations utilize cultural values, traditional knowledges, and where those knowledges are very much helpful for today. So a lot of those things, and where I see that, and it says that's a lot of places like mainstream organizations or bigger corporations are coming back to our community, coming back to our institutes and asking us, how could we do this? What could we do? I heard a speaker come from your institute and they mentioned this. So, and it's just like they're coming back and they're asking us. But at the same point, when we do that, and it's just like, we would actually like to make sure that, hey, this knowledge is old knowledge. But it's our knowledge. So try not to go back and, take that back to that mainstream organization and, make it theirs. Acknowledge that where it came from. Because that has that lot of, like, when we're, maybe a value of having that being respected and respectful.
love of nature. That nature is important, the land that you live on, that you have to take care of it, be custodians, not just users, that you have a responsibility, and that's difficult because there's so many that like to exploit because there are resources around, and it's a struggle. But also language, to take care of language. We're lucky in that way right now in Karasjoka because I think 78-80% of our students have Sami as their mother tongue. But if they don't come back after they've graduated, then there will be fewer young people that speak Sami. We're afraid of that. It doesn't have to happen, but it's harder to keep your language if you live in a bigger city, and the only place you speak your language is at home.
With uncertain times ahead, conference goers told us what they see as WINHEC's future role.
You know, it'd be really nice to have the higher education be more structured so that they could facilitate study abroad among the member schools, and then have some seminars to where people could sign up for those courses. So that some of the knowledge is shared among the different members. One of the Sami high schools getting their accreditation, and they were showing that one of the things that they do is they jump into ice cold water into the lake, and during the winter time, and that's what Indigenous people do. For Navajo, you roll out in the snow. Same concept, and I think people wonder, especially the young students wonder why we do this, and they don't see the value of something like that. But I think if they learn that other Indigenous nations do something similar, I think by sharing those type of information and experience, I think that will make them understand what they are being taught has value. Otherwise, they don't think it's important. So I think that's why the WINHEC should really continue to build those type of opportunities where people can share what's important and maintain it. There's just so much I think WINHEC needs to do. It seems to me it's still a young organization, and we need to build the WINHEC so that their finances are strong and that they are sustained. And right now we have so many schools who are accredited by the Board of Accreditation, and we hope to have a larger staff so that more schools could get their accreditation. If you ask me now if we're ready to do that, I don't think we are. We have very few staff, and they're doing a wonderful job, but we need to add more people to it. And I think we need to build our endowment, and then really build the WINU as well as in research, maintaining our intellectual property at the same time. And so it's a real challenge trying to work with sharing the knowledge, but at the same time making sure that the intellectual property are protected.
To build a very strong accreditation standards and then we want to be an international board of accreditation at uni or institution that every country in the whole world to accept us as a Indigenous education standard.
It's going to keep on getting stronger. I think there's some things that we need to concentrate on now, that we have achieved some momentum. So I think that the accreditation process is going from strength to strength. I think that WINU is really getting, like the World Indigenous Nations University is really getting some momentum too, and there's some real tangible things that we're doing. But I think with the passion and the spirit that comes with the community or the family of WINHEC, bringing our young people more into the fold and joining the circle with our elders, and how I think at the moment our discussions will be around making what we do holistic and joining the circle. So many opportunities and so much potential for the future of WINHEC. I think that we need to profile what we do more and build our membership, because I think there's so many more of our brothers, sisters and cousins that across the globe that would benefit from being part of our network if they knew what it was that who we are and what it was that we have to offer. And I think that the accreditation has sort of done that to some extent, like we've seen our membership, but the network grow from the accreditation piece, but people need to know that it's so much more than that, and that we have open arms. The opportunities and the potential are endless because of who we are and what we represent and what we bring.
I would hope we serve some 60 to 80 schools, programs, institutions, school systems across the world. We have accredited that many. But I'd love to see us literally be able to accredit thousands of institutions, programs, community programs, you name it, so that we can help them find their ways of educating their people. And I don't mean just the babies, I mean all of their people straight through. I think hopefully that's a dream that can be executed in the next 20. I think the second part of it is most of us are doing this work as volunteers. I don't think any of us are being paid for or paid to become a part of the WINHEC family and do the work on behalf of this organization. I don't think we should be paid, but there has to be some kind of infrastructure that's built around us to help further the process. Whether it's WINU, the university side of things, or accreditation, or any number of the other projects or initiatives that WINHEC runs or organized around, we do need funding. We need infrastructure and organizational infrastructure that might help us move forward. Being recognized, I think, is going to be really critical, right? Like AHEC in this nation, everybody knows, if you're involved in higher education, especially in tribal colleges, you know what AHEC is. The same holds true probably for NIA, same thing, right? But there's no real place, no real name holder for WINHEC. And I think that needs to happen somewhere at the international level.
Whether we have the same thinking as elders in 20 to 50 years' time, I'm not sure. Because we have elders now, but they'll be long gone by the time we get to that stage. And whether they've managed to pass that on, and whether that knowledge and that way of thinking still exists, I'm not sure. But I think WINHEC is still going to play a major part in keeping all our cultures together and bringing us all together. And yeah, so because I think this is probably the start of an uprising of Indigenous cultures.
We're a little bit nervous because we're growing really quickly. Like, the interest is there and it's starting to grow. We're just having conversation like, okay, we know we've got accreditation site visits to do. Who's going to be able to do them? Because we're all doing this, I call it off the side of our desks, right? We all have full-time jobs and we're doing this as something we believe in, right? So we're going to have to become, I would say, a little bit more formalized in terms of maybe having some staff, you know, and over the next 20 years, I think you will see that the aspects of WINHEC, like with WINU, like the university, that's going to become more formalized and more stabilized, you know. So I can only see it growing, but it's going to become more, I don't want to say structured, but more stabilized. We're going to have to find systems to stabilize it.
Let's go this way. One of the things I hope is that WINHEC doesn't struggle the way, you know, that there's things that we're struggling to get together, we're struggling to have things, and so that there's opportunity, and that opportunity and growth that we continue to do. We have been growing, and we have, you know, that we continue to take these opportunities. So, you know, not struggle, but then come together and then be able to enjoy, live, you know, be able to love what we're doing, continue to share our experience, our knowledge, our information, you know, back with our community, back with the people who are involved with our organizations, back to our students. And again, keep on growing.
The elders are not able to travel anymore, so I'm a bit worried about that. But hopefully we can inspire young people. That's why we brought 2 students.
Give acknowledgement to all those who have, you know, that have came before us, to be able to, you know, give thanks and to acknowledge, you know, because there are people that are here, and there are people that are not here. And, you know, all the hard work and dedication of what people have given us, I think that's, I really appreciate that. And then I know our group, WINHEC family, acknowledges them quite often. But for me, I do acknowledge, you know, those people who are here, those people who are helping, and those people who may not be here at this time and that have gone on to Spirit World. You know, they're still helping us.